Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Schenectady. I'm Geoff Lundy, any pronoun will do. Welcome to this circle where we celebrate Unitarian Universalism as a living religious tradition, which means we continue to learn and grow over time as we explore this faith. Our co-ministers, the Reverend Lynn Gardner and the Reverend Wendy Bartell, are having some time of rest and vacation this summer, as well as some study leave and planning time for the coming year. This morning, Steve Winters-Bona and I will lead today's worship as our Unitarian Universalist faith honors the wisdom of clergy and laity both.
So our story this morning is called God's Hat, and it is based on an African legend that Christopher Bruce heard third hand. All the details in this are of his own invention, and I invite you to substitute the word God with one that fits your beliefs, if that's going to help you listen to the story better. So once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight through town, and one day, something strange happened. God walked down the road, and she was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing robe, and on the top of her head was this wonderful hat. All the people stopped and stared at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she faded away into the distance. "Boy, God sure was beautiful," said one man, "and what a beautiful blue hat she had on." "Yes, God was beautiful," said a woman who was on the other side of the street, "but the hat wasn't blue. She was wearing a red hat." "You're wrong," said the man. "It was definitely a blue hat." "No, you're wrong," said the woman. "It was definitely a red hat." And as the two argued, others joined in the dispute, and soon the whole village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. All the people on the other side of the road were certain God was wearing a red hat. People got mad, they started screaming at each other, and finally people were so angry that they decided to build a wall that went straight down the center of town. From that point on, people on one side of the wall were enemies with people on the other side of the wall, and they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a blue hat. On the other side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a red hat. Many years had passed, and the people were still enemies. And then one day, God came walking through the village. She was smiling and balancing on top of the wall that the people had built many years ago. This time, she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and cried, "You must settle our argument." "Yes," said one man, "the people on that side of the street say that when you walked through the town or the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat, but we know better. We know you were wearing a red hat. So tell us, God, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment and began to scratch her head in thought. And she goes, I think I remember walking through this village many years ago, and on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that is blue on one side and red on the other. And saying nothing more, God continued walking down the wall until she disappeared off into the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. Suddenly, the sound of one child laughing, then another child started laughing, and another, and soon the whole village was roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been. And as the sound of laughter grew louder and louder, the wall began to shake and crumbled down. For many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down the wall between a divided and foolish people. I'm going to warn you all, I'm about to use a 4-letter word. I hate conflict. Some of you may hate it too. Some of you may actually enjoy it. And some of you may say, it depends on the situation. But no matter how you feel about conflict, we live in a world with other humans, And conflict is inevitable because we are all unique. I fear conflict because I believe it will expose me to the world as a fraud or someone who isn't worthy of existence. I immediately think, when I'm in conflict, that I'm the one that's already done something wrong. It's not a fun truth to believe about oneself. That belief is due to my upbringing. I was brought up in a home where one person used conflict as a way to feel better, regardless of the devastation and interaction that it left in its wake. Eddie Vedder has a lyric that goes, "Tidal waves don't beg forgiveness, crashed and on their way. Father, he enjoyed collisions, others walked away." When I observed conflict as a child, the survival part of my brain would activate. According to scientists, the most primitive part of the human brain is the brainstem, the cerebellum, and is responsible for survival functions and instinctive behaviors. It's associated with the limbic system, which is a set of structures that includes the amygdala and the hippocampus, and that deal with emotions, memory, and motivation. Non-scientists, or people who do their own research online, may refer to this as our lizard brain. You may have also heard of this as our flight or fight response to stress and danger. I always perceive conflict as a dangerous situation based on the beliefs about myself. I remember any time I was involved in conflict, I would just freeze, which is not fighting or flighting. I thought, oh no, it's all going to fall apart now, and everyone's going to hate me. I don't deserve to be here. That freeze response, believe it or not, is part of that fight or flight response. Your body freezes when it thinks you can't win the fight and you can't run away. So it's a perfectly normal response when you think that way. Now, as I got older, my freeze response turned into a fawn response. I would appease anyone who I perceived as someone who is going to have an outburst or be directly angry with me or be in conflict with me. I turned into Neville Chamberlain. And if you don't know who Neville Chamberlain is, I suggest you Google it. You may laugh when you see that. That's just me. I continue to be a people pleaser, just so that I can avoid any type of conflict. It invited so much chaos into my life. I would do absurd things just to keep everyone happy. I once drove to Boston to pick up my parents to visit me in Albany because they didn't want to fly here, because flying here would mean they would have to take a connecting flight. And my mother doesn't like connecting flights. I became very good at putting others first instead of taking care of myself. And that is what worked for me for almost 40 years, until a conflict came up between my mother wanting to come visit and the kids. On the same weekend, they wanted to go camping. I didn't know what to do because I couldn't appease everyone because someone was going to be mad. So what do? I shut down. I can't function. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to work. Couldn't do anything for days because I was stuck. As an aside, this was probably one of the only times by ignoring something it went away because my parents decided not to visit and the trip was canceled. Who would have thought? Regardless of that problem being solved for me, I was disturbed by my reaction. And with the help of my loving partner, Abby, I made the decision to go into therapy. And for the past 14 years, I have been working on dealing with many things. And dealing with conflict has been one of them. One of the things that I learned about myself when conflict is involved is that it all has to do with the relationship I have with the other party. and that is influenced by my attachment style. Psychologists define attachment styles as patterns of how people relate to others in close relationships. Attachment styles are formed in early childhood through interactions with caregivers. These styles influence how individuals experience intimacy, manage emotions, and navigate relationships throughout their lives. Psychologist Stan Tatkin broke down attachment styles in relationships to 3 basic styles: anchors, islands, and waves. Anchors represent secure attachment characterized by trust, safety, and the ability to form healthy, intimate relationships. Anchors are comfortable with closeness and independence, offering a stable and reliable presence in relationships. Islands represent avoidant attachment, where individuals tend to distance themselves emotionally, particularly in times of stress or of conflict. They value independence and may struggle with emotional vulnerability and intimacy. Waves represent anxious attachment, where individuals seek reassurance and closeness, sometimes to the point of being clingy or over-reliant on their partner. They may experience anxiety about abandonment and struggle with emotional regulation. So which one am I? Or you may be asking, which one are you? And the answer is, it depends. That's usually the answer to most questions. It depends. We're a bit of each of these depending on the day, the relationship we have with the other party, according to Tatkin. At my first job, when I started my career, there was a big conflict between my boss, who was the controller of the organization, and the president. It made going to work miserable. For months, there would be constant conflicts and bickering about this overall issue. I happened to be reading The Prince by Machiavelli at the time, and I came across a section where he discussed conflicts that he believed the leader should not be neutral in any type of conflict, but should actively choose a side. Remaining neutral is seen as both a sign of weakness and can lead to losing support of both sides. Choosing a side, even if it's the losing one, is preferable to neutrality. After reading that passage, I was fixated on trying to pick a side. I had to do it. It's a decision I needed to make, and it was a horrible choice. Do I be disloyal to my boss or disloyal to the president of the company? I didn't know. Then I had an epiphany. Even at my mentally unhealthiest, I don't know if that's a term, but at my mentally unhealthiness, I was able to decide what I needed to do, because the pain of losing either of those relationships was not enough to kick in my amygdala. I could rationally see that there was more to it than just the battle between the two of them. And so what I chose to do is chose to take the company side. So anytime the conflict erupted, I would think, what's the best for the company, and try and do it that, and try and work my way that way. It worked until my boss lost his job, but that's a different story. But just like in the story I told, when Gon answered the question about the color of her hat by saying it was red on one side and blue on the other, whether that was true or not, didn't matter. She chose to just say, she chose the villagers and the village as opposed to picking a right or wrong side. At what I consider now to be my mentally healthiest, again, I don't even know if these are terms, I'm sorry, but at my mentally healthiest, I recently had a conflict with someone that I love very, very much. And my amygdala took over like that. Couldn't think straight. I was unmotivated, I was depressed. And I didn't see this until after the conflict was over. And they said something to me after that has stuck with me. And they said, just because we're fighting doesn't mean the love I had for you goes away. my mind was blown. I'm still absorbing this information. Though I know that statement's true, I have a hard time feeling it's true. So what does all this mean? I don't know. I don't know what this means. This is all so new to me. I'm curious to see how I'm going to apply it in conflicts going forward. But it gives me hope. As Unitarians, we believe in a person's free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We draw from various sources, including the world's religions, Jewish and Christian teachings, humanists and scientific perspectives, and earth-centered spiritual traditions. Given the vastness of our source material, there are times when we all are going to be in conflict with one another based on our own search for truth and meaning. We do important work here. We're not always going to agree on everything, and yet we're still willing to work on our relationships because of how much we value this congregation. When a conflict arises, I invite you all to actively listen to each other, to communicate clearly and in words that the other side understands, and maybe just try to get out of your fight, flight, freeze, fawn response and try and see if there are other sides to the issue than just what the conflicted parties perceive. I still hate conflict. I just know I can navigate it better now, and I feel that there's a lot that we're going to have to navigate in the coming months and years. I look forward to doing it together, and I am reminded by the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted. Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that. We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. So now, go in peace, not in the peace of silence or avoidance, but the peace that comes with truth spoken in love, from courage born of compassion, and from the hard work of listening and understanding. May we carry with us the strength to face conflict with open hearts, the humility to see humanity in those who differ from us, and the wisdom to know when to speak and when to be still.